Hey friends, welcome to the Rhythms for Life podcast, where each week we talk about rhythms for building resilience so you can take charge of your mental, spiritual, and relational health.
These ideas come from Rebekah's best-selling book, Building a Resilient Life, How Adversity Awakens Strength, Hope, and Meaning. So grab your copy, invite your friends, and let's build resilience together.
Welcome back. I'm Rebekah.
And I'm Gabe. And it's fall.
It is. It is.
Your favorite season of the year.
I know.
We just cleared out the garden.
We did.
Which was like an amazing harvest.
Man,
and
that
colorful
thing goes,
and
I know.
The sweet potatoes are my favorite because that really gets us through winter.
It
and
is.
We had a big harvest.
Yeah, you are now an official sweet potato farmer. Like you had 2 full beds. I got it on video. I mean, those things they go gangbusters.
It's so fun. That's my favorite. You watch them for 100 days or so, 90 days depending, and then you just start pulling up this blanket of leaves that covers them, and here you have these
like
potatoes
gold.
Down in the ground. Yeah, it's like you're mining for gold, and you're like, wow, there's another one.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's always fun.
And we use those all the way up until next summer, or right when we're planting again, because they store really well. Now, this is not a farmer podcast, but you might get some anecdotal.
But it's a rhythms podcast, and the fall rhythm means, okay, summer's over.
Yeah.
Moving to the fall. Many of you have been joining with us for our first couple episodes, and we've got such a great season. I'm really excited about this season, more than any we've ever done, because we're really now pressing in even more deeply to how these rhythms impact every area of your life. And if you're just following along and you're new to us, this is a part of our THINQ Media podcast family now. There's so many other podcasts that our team is producing that will help you in specific areas of your parenting, maybe as you're raising next-gen teenagers and you're trying to navigate that world. But Rhythms is specifically about how do we live into this way of life that's healthy, that helps us come to the conversations and our leadership in the healthiest of ways.
Yeah, and what you're going to hear over and over again this season is the integration of a whole person, right? So mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, and vocational health. And those things have to work in tandem. And so today's episode I'm really excited about because it's all about the body. And we know that the body and the mind, there's this body-mind connection that's so important for our mental health. And I put a poll out on Instagram and Facebook socials about a month ago, just saying we're going to have an expert come on and talk about perimenopause, menopause, adrenals, hormones, the thyroid, energy, sleep. And I said, what questions do you have? And you guys flooded us. Probably 100 questions came in within 24 hours of all the questions that a lot of us women are feeling. And so we pared those questions down into categories, and we brought in Emily, and we just went one by one. So this is an hour-long episode. I'm just going to go ahead and warn you up front. We answered all the things.
It's so worth it, though. And women, if you're the one listening to this, and it's not a man, and you're married, get your husband in on this conversation because I was sitting there learning so much from 2 women, discussing the differences in our bodies, the way God's designed us, the way hormones work, and just it's fascinating, but also illuminating as a husband to just better understand the dynamics at play, relationally, mentally, physically. And as we talk about these rhythms, we've had a couple episodes talking about rest, with John Mark and with Alyssa, and just what does it mean to be in the right place mentally and physically to move forward. This one's going to really deal with restore. What are we eating? How are we taking care of our bodies? How is what we're putting into our bodies changing our outlook mentally, emotionally, physically, our relationship? So I think you're going to love this conversation.
Yeah, we really go there. And it's not just for perimenopause. I know a lot of women in their 40s and 50s are asking a lot of these questions because they're feeling it so acutely. But we're going back, to our teens and 20s and going, how do we set up a life even at those ages that prepare us to actually have that transition be more smooth, less volatile, more restful, more encouraging. So that was helpful.
And I think what you're going to love, too, is there is an opportunity as you listen to this to come join us this fall, November 21 and 22 in Franklin, downtown Franklin, Tennessee, for our emotional health retreat. This is something we've done every year. It's so fun because you get to meet, you get to interact with different people who are caring about these conversations, but also experts. So Emily, for example, will be with us. She'll be with us in person. You'll get to ask questions that maybe come up as you listen to this discussion. We'll talk more in depth about how our food and our physicality is affecting our emotions, but you'll also get to hear from other people like Dr. Chip Dodd and Dr. Kurt Thompson and Deborah Folletta and people who really have worked through the combination of the neuroscience to the body science to the emotional health side of mental health. And we would love for you to come join us the Thursday and Friday before Thanksgiving week, before we head into the holidays, to just have good quality time learning together and meeting other people. I think that will inspire and encourage you on your journey for the year ahead.
These are the voices we listen to, we learn from, we trust, and we always bring the best thinking to you guys for a 2-day intensive.
So you can go to RebekahLyons.com/retreat and use code RFL100. That's going to give you a discount. And I would encourage you, bring a friend. Bring one or two with you, because it's not only a great learning experience, but it's really fun to then over those couple days map out, okay, what is my strategy to live into rhythm in the year ahead? So let's drop in now and listen to our conversation with Emily MacLeod-Wolfe.
Hey friends, welcome back. I'm Rebekah.
And I'm Gabe.
And we are so excited about today. We were joking before we came on that I'm already having hot flashes just preparing for this conversation. We put a poll out because the hot topic right now, and I don't know why, because women have been around for centuries, but there is so much confusion about perimenopause and menopause and adrenal fatigue and energy and thyroid and HRT. Hormone replacement therapy is what that stands for. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm just attuned to it because I just turned 50, but a lot of my friends in the last couple decades, though, even younger women in their 20s and 30s are having a lot of concerns with sleeplessness, not having a lifestyle that is allowing them to de-stress and, come off that high and then the crash. So we put out a poll on Instagram and we said, hey, we have someone coming on. We're so excited. And what are your questions? And oh my goodness, in 24 hours, flooded with so many questions that we really had to put it into categories of all the questions and what we think will be most beneficial for this time. And of course, if you guys keep asking more things, we may do this again. But for today, we're going to try to synthesize a lot of the common concerns that women are having, and then therefore men, Gabe, is having as a result of living with us.
Well, hey, men may not go through perimenopause, but we have changes in our bodies too, right? As we're getting older and start to lose testosterone levels. Right. And so I think what's awesome is so many people are having this conversation about their health, about how did God design our bodies? How do we move in the direction of how we've been designed? And how do we get to the root causes of many of the symptoms and areas in which this is starting to affect us? And so I'm excited for you all to be introduced to Emily MacLeod-Wolfe, who's going to help us today navigate some of these questions. And what we love about Emily is she's not only well studied in the sciences of this, she went to Vanderbilt, she got her master's in science and nursing, she's also worked in family nurse practitioner work, she's studied, understands medicine, but she also understands integrative medicine, which is actually looking at root causes. It's better understanding where in our body's design did these things come from, and how do we create a better metabolic environment inside of our bodies that helps us push against both disease. But in this conversation, it's how do we approach this and understanding this is normal. The things we're experiencing aren't rare. We've seen them throughout history. But then what are these elements that maybe you're experiencing that they could be mitigated, both with a healthy life, with having these rhythms in place that we talk about all the time. And so I'm the listening ear here. I don't have a ton of experience except for navigating through the lens of Rebekah sharing the things she's walking through. And I'm sure there's some husbands listening or some wives who want their husbands to listen. And I might have some interesting questions that help the men understand this better.
Well, and I think what we're really going after are what are the root causes? Part of our work here on Rhythms for Life is normalizing prevention care, not waiting until the house is on fire and then going to the doctor and blindly just taking whatever we're prescribed without understanding, is there a healing journey that is possible with this versus just this acute emergency? And And so that's what you do. And I think this pairing of traditional medicine as well as functional medicine does allow us to look at it from all angles. And you have helped me with this. This is why I was so glad to have you on, Emily, because we've been walking this journey for the last several months of where I came in just crashing, cortisol really high in the morning, but from noon to 3 to 5 to 9, just a slow crash and decline of energy, which nobody wants that, at 50 with, now we have an 11-year-old in 5th grade and she gets off the bus and I just want to lay in bed. This is not a way so I think a lot of women.
But there's so many women that are dealing with that.
And I think that's the root causes matter. And I think that's why there's a unique, timely curiosity about that around our physical health in general is that, okay, what do we need to learn personally? And what responsibility do we need to take in our physical health as well as our emotional health and now our hormonal health as women because we're feeling the side effects of not taking care of ourselves and we're feeling responsible to go, okay, I want to lean in and I want to learn. So kudos to all of you out there who have asked these questions. You are curious, you're leaning in, you want to grow because you're feeling the pains of being not aware. And so, Emily, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really honored to be a part of this.
I want to hear how this started for you. How did you get interested in this? I know you've had some of your own experiences with dealing with health symptoms and talk a little bit about your own journey.
Yeah, so it actually started from a very young age. I was actually diagnosed with eczema, thyroid disorder, at the age of 11 and at middle school. And just the fact of dealing with those things, we went to doctor after doctor after doctor to figure out what was going on. They just told me, take steroids, put steroids on your skin. And I was a bleeding open wound at that point. I literally would cry myself to sleep. I would wake up in the morning and literally had to cling to the scripture and Isaiah 61, the beauty for ashes, that the Lord would turn my skin from ashes into something beautiful and beauty in Zion, and Zion being my middle name. And so I was clinging to that scripture, having an identity crisis, but at the same time brought me closer to the Lord, but at the same time instilled this passion because I had a dream about medical missions at a very young age. And then I thought instantly doctor. And then it was actually a nurse practitioner. And she asked all the questions that I literally no doctor had ever asked before. And that was something where we got to the root cause, that there could be so much more than just the surface, because if there are skin problems, if someone's presenting with skin problems, that's the largest organ in the body, but it's the last organ that oftentimes presents as a symptom. So if there's acne, hormonal imbalances, we talk about hormonal acne, that's usually the last organ that will present. So there's something going on internally that's presenting. It could be from birth until now. We look at any different stressors that could be contributing to that, like imbalances and all of that. So anyways, that put me on that journey to be able to.
And everyone has a personal story like that, whether you had, rashes or eczema, all of our family even, and part of that was due to dairy intolerance or
food
might be a gluten.
allergies,
I mean, there's so many things our body is trying to process in these environments at every age and stage.
Right.
And it does feel like you're trying to throw paint at a ball. You're trying to hit a target, but you're just hitting it at a wall. You're where are we going?
Yeah.
How do we do this?
Where do we even start? Because there's so many different things. There could be mold exposure, heavy metals exposure, chemicals, pesticides. And it's okay, it can also feel really overwhelming for someone that's dealing with energy crashes and fatigue and burnout to even think about taking extra steps to take care of themselves when you're in survival mode. And that fight or flight stage. So I don't know if we talk about the adrenals.
In my journey, it always has been some friend alongside me. In Rebekah's journey, sometimes I've been that friend that is sitting outside of the crisis that feels so acute, that brings a little bit of energy, some curiosity, some question asking, how is this coming upon you right now and why? And that's the challenge right in our current medical system. It's designed for symptom treatment. And we just keep throwing things and medicines, and people are on multiple prescriptions trying to solve symptoms, and we don't ask the deeper question. Thankfully, it feels like people are waking up to that.
Right.
We're being exposed that, hey, there's a better way to think about it. I want to also note that we're not giving medical advice on this podcast. You're going to hear us talking about our journeys, the things we're learning. Hopefully you'll get educated, but we believe everybody should see their own doctor or someone in integrative health that can help them walk through and play out how their body's working and different. But I hope today, in just hearing our conversation, all of us will feel a little more enlightened about what we can do.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
So the key is we're going to talk about perimenopause and menopause, but I don't want to start there. I want to start before that.
Yeah.
Because something happens before that impacts that experience. And I didn't know this until I started meeting with you.
Yeah.
And this is affecting women like you. It started at age 11. It affects a lot of women in their 20s and their 30s. And how you are living and the choices you're making with this chronic stress, lifestyle shifts. It looks different today than it did when my mom was 20.
Right.
When I was 20, even Kennedy's version of 20 looks very different.
So different.
And so every
Technology,
generation,
everything.
like we're living in a new moment. Our food doesn't look the way it used to look. We're not in an agrarian, like fully centered lifestyle anymore. We now have devices in our hands. The blue light is keeping us on. This cortisol is always surging. It's not in a rhythmic pattern. And so the overwhelm that we might be feeling even in our hearts and our souls is also happening in our bodies. Our bodies are overwhelmed.
Right.
And you talked to me so much about there's an external stress
Yes.
that comes up against you, but then that creates an internal stress in your body. And you might go, well, I can fix the external stress by like numbing out or escaping or avoiding. The problem is what's already begun in the insides is breaking down on a cellular level because you've been working so hard in that fight and flight and freeze response to all the externals. So let's start.
Right.
Let's pretend, and hopefully there are like teens, college girls, 20-somethings right now that are on a dangerous path when it comes to energy, adrenal, fatigue, hormone imbalance, and how that could play out in their 40s and 50s.
That's so huge. Great question. So the first thing would be just a brief explanation of the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys, and they produce many different types of stress hormones. There's cortisol, there's adrenaline, that's the fight or flight. If a bear were to come attack you, you would have a bunch of adrenaline. Cortisol is the one that keeps you in the fight or flight. Now, it's good. It's the one that keeps you awake and during the day. And so we have cycles of cortisol and melatonin. So cortisol is what's keeping us awake during the day. Melatonin kicks in at nighttime and keeps
To help
us
us sleep.
fall asleep and stay asleep. And so this is where lifestyle changes right in the teenage years, and college is sometimes terrible for this because it's the late nights and you're studying all night and you've got coffee, and coffee kind of spike the cortisol, and so then it's starting these patterns of like late nights and irregular sleep, and then all of those things can start to after college. I see a lot of patients where they're starting to feel really exhausted. I'm only in my 20s, and why do I feel like this? I'm like working out and doing all these things, and I'm not losing weight anymore. Like I just can't lose weight. Well, it could actually be because the adrenal glands have been producing so much cortisol over time that the body is stuck and into survival mode and literally holding on to fat cells as protection over like the most vital organs. So it can present as stubborn belly fat. It can literally present as a puffy face, like cortisol, and different things where I've seen that very common where it's like, I'm doing everything. I feel like I'm doing, even into menopause, like I'm doing all, especially like I'm doing all the right things and I'm not losing weight or I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, it can be like the cortisol is producing, and there's like 4 different stages of that. It can
Talk about those stages. Yeah.
4 different stages. So the first stage is just that extreme lifestyle of jump up, and maybe you've got a bunch of kids and you're like, I got to go take care of my kids and go, and I got to make sure my husband's out the door and and go throughout the day. And then maybe there's a little crash in the afternoon, but I got to get right back, and then dinner, and then there's a second wind after dinner, and then you can do it for so long. That's kind of just high cortisol, living off of high cortisol.
Yeah.
Now, cortisol is going to start to affect the blood sugar because cortisol spikes glycogen in like glucogenesis into the liver where it starts to produce excess blood sugar. So high cortisol can start to cause blood sugar imbalances and insulin resistance. And if that's not dealt with, it could eventually cause diabetes and things because the blood sugar is not being balanced, and the the liver has to pull from stores other than sugar. So it's starting to pull from protein. It's pulling from the muscles. And so that's why even a practical thing is eating protein can help balance out the adrenal glands, so much so because it's preventing the body from eating itself, essentially the glucogenesis that is needed.
Right. That's like a kind of a little bit of a wow, aha, because I think a lot of 20-somethings, and I did this into my 30s too. We moved to New York City, Manhattan, which is a cortisol boost. It's a permanent cortisol of 5 years, where it was very much a survival mode. It did feel like you had to always be on. You're always kind of like learning new things constantly. And we have talked about you build resilience through these moderate, predictable, controllable expressions of stress. But when you have these acute triggers of high stress that never really let down, then you are retraining your body and your brain. So let's talk about that. So if girls in their 20s are like, hey, I'm killing it and rocking it. Yes, I get tired, but then I have a espresso at 3. And then at night I can power through because they're still young and they have enough reserves to do that.
Yes.
When does it switch over to where those reserves no longer are working for you and everything feels hard? Like, how long are you in that acute stage to where, like for me, it looked about like 10 to 12, 14 years.
That's
and
amazing.
Then it just,
sometimes it's shorter for other women. Like that was a big stint of high cortisol output.
I think it was just stubbornness. And then the body's like, we are done.
Woman.
We are done.
But so the first stage is the high cortisol output. Now the body's demand for cortisol, it can't keep up with the amount of cortisol that's being produced. So then there's like the adrenal stage 2, where it's starting to be, I'm having a harder time getting out of bed throughout the day. The energy crash is not bouncing back as quick. There's a crash after dinner. Then it starts to affect the night. So either wired and tired, like cannot shut the brain off right before bed, or waking up between 2 and 4 in the morning. Classic signs of adrenal imbalances, like something's going off with the cortisol and the melatonin, the cycles. And so then it goes on further to where it's like just eventually we want this beautiful bell curve of your cortisol for men and women to spike and peak at noon and then come down before dinner. But it could be really off
depending on
travel, demand, lifestyle,
after school activities,
sleep, stress, just spikes, big spikes. And then sometimes it's the opposite, right? We want a bell curve like this, and it could be completely imbalanced. And then we're seeing a crazy spike of adrenaline right before bed. Not what we want. We want you to be calming down and like going into bed. Yeah. And then eventually it could just flatline. Now that is where it's like, wow, adrenal repair and have to have
That's where I'm at.
Glandulars.
That's my hand up. That's why I came to you. I'm like, we are trying to not flatline. We feel like we're getting there. Because burnout, let's talk about what the symptoms of that looks like.
Right. Well, burnout, so then it's just... we haven't even talked about. I know you have. You guys got to go listen to all the other podcasts that Rebekah has done on taking care of mental stress, because that is huge. Like the mindset, and even reading the book, the fact of you have to reshift your narrative and all of those things. It's so critical. But like when you're talking about total burnout from a physical standpoint, exhaustion throughout the day, energy, low libido.
I was going to sneeze. Now it's gone. Go ahead.
We get to libido and you have to sneeze. I mean, come on. This is what men are asking about.
That word. Thank you for bringing that.
When your wife's so tired, that it used to be thought of as a big excuse. Like, she's just not in the mood, so she says she's tired.
Or a headache, they would say.
A headache.
Oh, yeah, I have a headache.
But that.
But now it's truly exhaustion.
It's helpful to understand how much each of our bodies are literally. It's almost, and it feels like the last couple decades, we've seen this start to spike, right? I mean, the technology,
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why the body if it's in for survival mode for too long, the body will shunt all the energy and blood flow to the heart and the lungs and all the other non-essential organs are put to the side. That is the gut. So if you ever notice like feeling really nauseous, diarrhea, constipation, different things like that, like IBS symptoms, it could be a suppression affecting adrenals to the gut. And it also could be reproductive, gets put on the back burner because it is not essential to
not keeping you
survive
alive
in that moment. So
Wow.
that long
So even
term
fertility is affected by this because, I mean, the birth rate, just the latest data, we've gone since 2009. It was 2.1 in America was the average birth rate. And now we're down to 1.4. Yeah. And this is just in
less than
15
half.
years,
so,
which equates to
so many
7 million plus
miscarriages.
children that haven't been born because the birth rates, and I know there's a lot of factors in that, but I haven't heard that connection that the body actually isn't helping the reproductive organs function as well as they could.
We talk about the external stressors, internal stressors. We sometimes don't have control over all the things that we are getting inundated with on the external stressor. We can limit those things, but EMFs, things, you might turn your phone off. Somebody else has their EMFs going. So, it's just like
electromagnetic frequencies.
Yes,
right?
thank you. Electromagnetic frequencies, we might not have control, but the internal stressors are just like continually going. And so that
they're kind of, which God has made the body so beautiful that it will rally to fight for what is essential for life.
Yeah.
Problem is when you stay in that hyper-vigilant state, whether it's mentally or physically, you're gonna burn out. I mean, the body's gonna exhaust itself, the brain exhausts itself. You feel it all around. Usually, you're not doing well mentally if you're physically flatlining, right? If you can't get out of bed or you can't function, it's hard to will your way into going like, let's go to the gym, right? The thing you need, or like, let's just eat a huge thing of protein. You're like, no, I just want a smoothie. I want comfort food.
Comfort food.
So, and I think that's what happens is that this unhealth begets more unhealth because it requires this kind of reboot that when you're just describing this flat line, what you and I talked about in the spring, which has been now 6 months, praise God, there's a turning and I'm so grateful for it at 50. But I just want to encourage you listeners, it does take intention.
It does.
And I wrote the book on rhythms. I'm doing the regulating rhythms for the brain. But because I've exhausted my adrenals for so long with travel, flights, just around the clock care. Yep. And then just whatever deadlines would create a little extra stress. Then over time, Gabe started losing sleep because I'm losing sleep and tossing and turning. And then all of a sudden I'm kind of, okay, what is the potential for repair? Because when you get to that burnout, it does feel there's a languishing, there's a lostness, there's a sadness that accompanies that. There's a little bit like I was
helplessness.
Yeah,
feeling.
I was teary in your office the first day. Like I feel like a sense of defeat because I just can't crack the code, even though I've tried everything I know to do.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to that person? Because for us, we had to start with some real baseline like testing.
Yeah.
But what would you say to that person just for like, okay, here's where we're at?
And big picture, the hope. Like, do people who are listening to this that are like, that's me.
That's me. Like,
is there hope for the body to regenerate and see renewal?
Yes, there is hope. There's hope. There's living proof. Like I've dealt with it. You've dealt with it. There's absolute help. The way that God's designed our bodies, it's incredible because the tissues and the cells are repairing like at a monthly basis. So like there's ability to repair the adrenal glands again and get back to the baseline and also just like to validate the fact that if you feel like, wow, there's no medical test or anything that seems to show. I go to the doctor and I get my blood work and my cholesterol is fine and my, the markers that they checked say fine and I feel horrible. Like that there's something that could be going on deeper or that you haven't yet discovered the type of testing that was needed. And we ended up doing 4-point cortisol, and I would recommend that saliva testing over blood work for hormones because it's just the more accurate way to test hormones. And so getting your practitioner to do that kind of testing is really helpful to just get a picture.
A bell curve.
A bell curve.
Or lack thereof. Right. I remember that first morning, like I had to do a saliva test right when I woke, right around, early morning within the first hour, then again at lunch, then again before dinner, and then before bed. And we were able to get a very full, comprehensive 24-hour, like this is what's happening. You're spiking way too high, and therefore you are now crashing.
But also the testing for women, this is something I just learned, is different, and based on where they're at in their cycle, is critical, because for a woman, their hormone production's very different than a man.
Look at you. You know these things.
That's great,
I'm
Gabe.
well studied.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, that's why I had to take that test on a very specific day after my period.
And that's a really good point. I actually wanted to bring that up, of just like an understanding of the men's hormones versus women's hormones. So women's cycles generally are on a 28-day monthly basis. It can fluctuate 26 to 32 average. Men's hormones cycle through in 24 hours. So there's a joke in, like, I'm sure you know,
you should have more mood swings than me.
I know. I feel like I'm ovulating every day. So is that what's happening?
That's why he wants to have sex every day.
Well, so because there's a joke, even just like in understanding marriage, of the fact that, like, you could say something to your husband and he responds one way. Just say it 15 minutes later and he'll respond completely different.
But this is so helpful. I mean, for men to understand it takes 28 days to go through this process, which explains why at different parts of the month, they're in a different mood, a different outlook on life.
Explain that a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
So start. Yeah,
help us out.
So day 1 is the day that you start bleeding, menstruating. Day 1 to day 5 to 7 is typically the bleeding. That's like low energy, right? So the body is literally tearing out the lining of the uterus and preparing for the next cycle. So it's almost like a winter for the body. It's like kind of hibernate and repair and reset. And if you look at it like almost like the seasons of each week of a woman's cycle is like the seasons.
Oh, wow.
Like then we
so
go into
interesting.
spring, because then estrogen. So we start here low hormones. It's another bell curve. So super low hormones in the very beginning. Then the hormones start to follicular phase. We're starting to develop a follicle that could potentially prepare for a pregnancy. So there's follicular, there's high estrogen. This is where libido should be highest and highest energy, productive. If you're brainstorming your creative ideas, women, like in that second week, it's like really great time to do all of those things.
I love it.
Spring. And you think almost like eating seasonally. Similarly, eating seasonally for the cycle is really good. Like what you would eat in the winter, like those kinds of foods is a good time to be eating those things on your cycle versus in the springtime. And then we have ovulation. That's like the peak of libido for a woman. That's also like the highest chance of pregnancy. The way that God designed the body and everything. And then after that, then there's the luteal phase. And the luteal phase, this is where mood swings, PMS, irritability, just getting easily irritated. Now mix that with adrenal imbalances, just some PMS and some adrenal imbalances, and there could be a perfect storm, essentially, for what's going on, because we already have a lower, when you're stressed, you have a lower threshold for everything. Right. And your capacity for even like small things feels really hard. Like taking a supplement feels exhausting, almost like, adding one more thing to my plate. Like I'm full, right?
So that overwhelm could take over in that third week, right?
In the third week, yes.
And that's when you take that test. That's when day 19 to 21.
Days 19 to 20,
21. Yeah. So that was helpful for me. She's like, you have to do it exactly during this time because it's going to get the most accurate
of your progesterone, your estrogen, your testosterone, and then your adrenals. You're seeing where your body's at that point.
Now, I'd love to talk about how adrenals impact the thyroid, and then we're going to jump to perimenopause and how that integrates there.
So much to talk about.
I know. This is a lively conversation. So a lot of people have talked about hypothyroidism or Hashimoto's, but the adrenals is such a big piece. And I remember you telling me after we had done that test, that was the first test. You're like, we got to do adrenal test. Like we just need to know what's going on with your hormones. And then once we did that, you were able to go, okay, we need to how do we repair, right? What does repair look like? And we'll talk about HRT, but in a way that's most natural so that the thyroid, so that you don't have to be, your exact words are, if we can reverse this now, you can avoid being on thyroid medication for the rest of your life. And I came home and cried. And I was like, yes, please. That's what I need to know, because mine was more acutely impacted. Yes, I've been going through perimenopause, but behind all that was an adrenal fatigue, almost not a failure, but very much a dysfunctional spot to where repair needs to happen now. Yes. So talk about that, the thyroid, what was happening, and then how you would supplement that in, a natural way.
Right. So adrenal fatigue symptoms and low thyroid symptoms can be very similar. So if someone is presenting with really low energy, slower metabolism, can't lose weight, losing hair, things like that, it could be adrenals. It could also be thyroid, low thyroid function, and they work very much together because the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal, there's literal an axis between the brain and the adrenal glands. So if it can send unhealthy signals from the adrenals to literally start destroying thyroid tissue or causing the thyroid tissue to not produce as much.
And why would the brain do that? Why would the hypothalamus send a signal to send too much or not enough? Why would it?
Well, so the thyroid is a little butterfly-shaped gland. It sits right here on the thyroid. It produces two hormones, free T3, free T4 is like the main ones that circulate in the body. And then the brain is the control center for all of our hormones. So the brain is telling us, the thyroid, produce more, produce less. So based off of the levels in the blood, it's going to produce more or less. And there's different things that can affect it, because if there's thyroid hormone is not getting into the cell, that is a problem. And like we talked about, the cell itself can be overloaded. So just like our bodies, we go back to just a cellular level. We have so many toxins that could go in, and then it's going to be so blocked up with the toxins, it's not going to get nutrients in, and it's not going to receive thyroid hormone. It's not going to receive what it needs, and it's not going to receive insulin because of the cortisol spike, and blood sugar is not going to be regulated.
Right. So even the cell is overwhelmed because of all the toxins, whether it's our environment, our food, EMF, our
So
screens.
Healing really begins in the cell. Let's go back to the way God designed us on a very intricate basis. Is wow, there's a powerhouse in each of our cells, the mitochondria. So if that energy powerhouse of each cell is depleted, we're going to feel it systemically throughout the whole
mitochondria
body.
is kind of everything, isn't it? I mean, this is where I've done a little bit of research on EMF and the way we're using our phones, the radiation that's happening, the radiation coming from cell towers that are going up everywhere.
Yeah.
There are now studies starting to show how much that's impacting the mitochondria and the way our cells are creating energy. So these are all these toxins in our environment that there's not a lot you can do about them, depending on where you live. I mean, you can think about those kinds of things, but our only defense is to try to be our healthiest self and allow the body to hold off, right?
I mean,
these
as
toxins.
you know, and you've probably done it yourself, there's a couple things you can do in the house, like at nighttime, not sleep with your bed or with your phone right beside your bed, put it on the opposite side, airplane mode, turn the Wi-Fi off.
Yep.
I don't know if you've tried a grounding mat, but I
just walk outside barefoot.
That'll do it
but
too.
I haven't slept outside on the ground. But the grounding mats,
we actually don't sleep in our bed anymore. We camp in a tent outside.
You got
talk
to be
about
grounded
a
at all times.
Oh yeah, it's really helping.
Tell us what a grounding mat is.
Okay, so grounding mat essentially does what it connects you to the frequencies of the earth. And that actually can pull out some negative frequencies from the body. Yeah. So just, go outside, walk in the sand, go to the beach.
Well, C.S. Lewis, they would talk about how he would come home from work most days, take his shoes off, and go walk out in the grass. Now, I don't know if he understood grounding. Maybe he did, but he wanted to touch creation because our world has gotten, so much concrete. We're not touching earth anymore, and our bodies were designed for that. So more people are starting to talk about that, but this is simple. Get barefoot. Go walk around on your grass or outside so that you naturally are having some of these benefits.
And actually, it can help with really bad period cramps. Just pulling out the electromagnetic frequencies. I've seen that successful with myself and with patients using a grounding mat during that week, like either doing like a wrist attaching grounding mat or like a mat on the bed or something.
Or if you don't have that or can't afford that, you
Just go outside.
could have your wife sleep outside in the grass. Is that what you're recommending?
It sounds
Do you want
fun.
to try that and report back on
No, you
your
actually.
period cramps went away because you
You're
slept
like,
on
no,
the grass?
you're coming with me. You can sleep outside.
Yeah.
Goodness. Do we do an air mattress though? Because does that
Nope.
negate the grass?
Grass.
How about
Or
like
dirt.
a grassy air mattress?
Yeah.
Okay, back
Oh
to
my
rein us
goodness.
in, please.
But
But
anyhow.
speaking of cramps, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, we're all over the map here, but you recommended
all
raspberry leaf
interconnected.
tea. Raspberry leaf tea. And I have always done like a couple of Motrin or Aleve or anything for cramping or pain. This is the first time I haven't, and it worked.
That's wonderful.
Because the problem is we continue to put things in us that are toxins, right? There's a toxin still attached to these over-counter things that give us that quick hit of like a headache. I'm trying to prune all of that, like just not. And so I'm like, Gabe, this might be a harder week and that's okay. But I just keep hydrating and I keep doing the tea. And it's good. It's good.
That's
trying
so
to
good.
fend off. And I think part of it, again, is prevention. I'm trying to fend things off before it gets bad. If I start to feel a headache coming on, I'm doing an element or I'm doing just Celtic salt with lemon. I'm trying to stay hydrated with the minerals my body is deficit of, because a lot of this is still impaired by not just detoxing, but then putting those deficits that you need, the nutrients right back in.
Exactly.
But like you had told me, I was doing
Magnesium,
supplements before I came to you, but they weren't working because it wasn't really tailored to what my body specifically needed.
Everybody's body.
And then my cells were
has
so
different-
overwhelmed, they weren't really getting the nutrients from them anyways. So that's why I think some listeners might go, well, I feel like I'm taking all the supplements that I know to
Maybe
do.
we need to test
Yeah.
specifically
Yes.
what nutrients your body needs, and
Right.
then we can tailor it. But also, if your body is so stressed, like you said, it's not going to absorb, or it's so
Right.
filled with toxins,
Yeah.
or so filled with heavy metals. Metals literally can displace the nutrients that
Yeah.
the body. It's like holding that place where
Yeah.
zinc should be. It's held by.
And we'll talk in a moment about where everybody, no matter where you live, you can go look and try to find people who are doing integrative medicine, and that will be helpful for those of you who want to take a next step. Well, we're excited to share with you an incredible opportunity this October for your family as we move into an election season at THINQ to help you think well and help your kids, maybe it's your small group, your community, your friends, to think well about this election season. We're creating an event that can happen in your living room or around the dining room table called Let's Talk Politics. And we're going to give you access to 4 talks that we've curated specifically for you to come together, watch them for 9 minutes on our smart TV app, and then have a very valuable conversation amongst one another about how can we think well about politics.
I'm so grateful for this conversation and the opportunity to be led through this and guided through this. As we know, our political views can be so polarizing, even with friends and family and people that we love, because we don't listen to one another. We don't hear the felt needs that are coming behind those opinions. And so think creating something that allows you to have ears to hear, to listen, to be curious, to seek to understand, and learn things that you might not have been willing to learn because somebody else is moderating that for you.
Yeah, we're bringing together the best voices, people like Oz Guinness, trusted person who's been a leader. He's 82 years old. Also, William B. Allen, who's one of the greatest political scientists who has great knowledge. So you're going to learn. This is going to feel like you're getting educated in these short 9-minute conversations. But we also have with us Katie Faust, who's going to help educate you on how to have a child lens on when we're thinking about policies that are going to affect our families and our children, as well as John Bevere giving a talk that's about hope beyond November 5th, because we all know this election doesn't mean everything. It's important. But as Christians, we've got to walk forward and be all a part of creating a better world around us.
As a mama, that means so much to me. I want to know how the political landscape does impact our family, how it impacts our children, what they're learning, what they're exposed to. And I, as a mom, need to be informed. But because there's so much out there, it feels so overwhelming to know where to begin. And so this being curated in a very succinct way that I can talk about this not just as a family with you and the kids, but talk to other moms about this as well and lead these groups even outside of the home, but just however the places are that are impacting what you care most about, we'll all be more versed on what to say and what to know.
So this is available to everybody. This is a gift to you, thinkmedia.com/family. We aren't putting a specific price on this. We're just asking for people to donate, make a contribution of any size to Think Media. And when you do that, you're going to get access to these talks. You're going to be able to download the smart TV app, use it in your living room, wherever you're gathering your family or your friends. We hope you'll take advantage of this to create great conversations that lead to wisdom. Go to thinkmedia.com/family to learn more about Let's Talk Politics. Let's continue into menopause and just when people should expect to enter menopause. What age? Is it different for every woman?
That's a great question. Yes. Okay. So we talked about adrenals, cortisol. So cortisol steals progesterone. So we talk about the women's hormones, and in the 20s, the progesterone and estrogen are really robust and like it should be great for pregnancy and everything. And then into the 30s, progesterone will start to decline naturally. Like that's just the way God's designed our bodies, and into the 40s. So like just gradually. And then into the 40s and 50s, estrogen starts to decline. And somewhere between 40s and 60s, testosterone's also declining. And so like there's this general decline in hormones over time. Now, what we do and the choices that we make now and in the younger years, making those lifestyle, read the Rhythms of Life book and everything, Rhythms of Renewal, all of that, because it's going to prolong the capacity. So once we hit menopause, the ovaries stop producing estrogen and progesterone. So where else is estrogen, progesterone? Where else could the progesterone even be? And there's hormones such as DHEA, which is the precursor to testosterone. That's also found in the adrenal glands, the DHEA. Mm-hmm. And so if we're depleting the DHEA at a really young age, you could be hitting perimenopause and menopause sooner because that has been happening. Like been seeing that happen sooner because there's a natural depletion happen, or not natural, abnormal depletion, but based off of lifestyle.
Right.
At some point, you run out of some of these things your
run
body
out
has.
Of the reserves.
I mean, it's interesting because it's like in some ways, I know your organs can regenerate or different. You know, I don't know the exact numbers, but I've heard things like a certain organ in 3 months is it's a brand new organ because of the way the body works. So in some ways, there's regeneration that's always happening, but there are these other factors that you do run out at some point, right? The body just doesn't have anymore.
You definitely run out of eggs. I think you know, we're all born with a specific amount of eggs, and I think one study said you lose on average about 11,000 per month per period, and that slowly declines over time.
Yeah. So
that's what menopause is. Like the day you have menopause is the last day of your last period. And
well, actually, menopause, the difference between perimenopause and menopause, you have to have no period, no cycle for 12 months.
12 months.
12 months.
Okay, right. So then perimenopause goes until 12 months after the last cycle.
No, prior.
So, perimenopause is all the way until, exactly what you just said.
You're right. 12 months.
We
can do math. It's good. Yes.
And then what happens at menopause?
So the ovaries are no longer producing estrogen or progesterone completely because ovulation, estrogen cycle, the cycle is no longer happening. Okay. Where there's the bleeding, the follicular, the luteal phase,
so
everything we just talked
thing.
about.
So then what happens? Like what's the hormone cycle?
What's the negative of that?
Yeah.
Well,
Is it always winter? I think that's what men are wondering. Is it winter now?
It's from winter
my 50s, 60s, 70s.
Is it winter? Yeah. So there are things that we can do to support estrogen and progesterone naturally, and even in like the foods and exercise and things that can be done. And then the other question that we've gotten frequently is like, okay, what about hormone replacement? Because I know that the body runs out and then what about that? And what kind? And so should we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that because there's two things I want to point out. There's some data attached to like the later and the longer that you can still have a period that decreases some risks of other cancers or heart disease. Do you want to speak to that at all, or just how it embodies life? Like it's a good thing to have it go as long as possible, but also we can't control when that happens. But what can we do to?
Right, that's the thing. We can't fully control when the body's going to do that. We can do things that will better support the hormones throughout the 30s, 40s, 50s, and into. And one thing is loving your adrenals. Like who would have thought? But like actually loving them and supporting them because that's where your DHEA control directly affects libido and memory, concentration, and all these different things. And so if the DHEA is being prematurely depleted, going to run out of. There are opportunities and ways in which those things can be supplemented. However, it is not recommended to go just start taking a DHEA supplement or any, because it is a hormone. You need to see a practitioner and like actually
what are
figure
other
out the
natural
dosage.
ways to support the adrenals for people who are hearing this and they're like, okay, that's the thing I need to do. Where do we start?
One thing practically we just talked about with food is protein. So that's really key. Protein with every single meal, smaller, more frequent meals, and then not making sure that it's like every meal it's protein and like some type of fiber because fiber is going to help like the hormones excess. We get so many imbalances in hormones. Like we have women with PCOS and endometriosis and terrible periods and different things like that. But making sure that there's fiber is going to prevent excess bad estrogen. There's good estrogen types, bad estrogen, and bad estrogen can contribute to breast cancer and all those different things. So like protein and good rich fiber vegetables.
Yeah. So what would you recommend for breakfast? Like a protein and a recommended fiber, like just right out of the gates.
So it could be like a turkey sausage and like some sauteed vegetables, like some spinach, some different things like that. It could be, depending on, some people have a sensitivity to egg. So we just you could just check and see if your body's okay with egg.
Tell me more about, I've read that the order in which we eat our food can impact the blood sugar production, meaning like you shouldn't start with the carb, you should start with the vegetables. And that actually kind of pre-lines the body to then take in the protein and then eat those carbs last. And the blood sugar production, I don't know if it's blood sugar, but the production is just a little less of a hit than if you start.
Yeah. So even just like
Gabe's going to Vanderbilt right now under the radar. No, I'm just kidding.
Makes sense. The blood sugar, exactly, is just, we want to keep it as stable as possible. So just like we don't want adrenal spikes and crashes, we don't want blood sugar spikes and crashes. And now there are studies showing that if you can keep the blood sugar stable like this, it can reverse the risk of Alzheimer's, diabetes, so many different diseases linked to sugar in the blood. Yeah. And so if we can, there's the order in which you're eating the food, even like you said, so if you have, there's some people that like to mix all that food together on the plate, but if you're good with eating the vegetable first, it does help with the soluble fiber and it starts allowing the gastric juices to start working. And then if you eat the protein next, it's going to start stabilizing the blood sugar and it will tell the leptin, the body will tell you when you're starting to feel full, so you're not going to overeat as much, and then eating the carb at the end.
So order that salad, right? First, start with the salad, which is how most of us grew up eating. Keep that in play. And
can the carb be a dessert?
It could be,
on certain occasions.
I'm just saying, like, if you're ever going to have fruit, desserts, or anything, the best way to eat it is after a meal, like after a full meal with protein. Or if you're going to have a snack, have it with protein. If you're going to have fruit, don't have it by itself because it could spike the blood sugar and crash it. try and have it with.
Yeah, protein. That's what we're hearing. Let's talk about one of the questions about HRT is bioidentical versus synthetic. Let's talk about that because you're saying like if you do need to now supplement with a hormone, so I'm taking a DHEA based on that cortisol, but it is a natural bioidentical. So talk about the difference of how to know what to start with, there's all these different forms of how to take any of these hormones.
Yes. So there's a lot of there's 3 main kinds of hormone replacement. One is plant-based. So you might, find these over the counter as a capsule or supplement. Another one is synthetic hormones. So they are completely man-made. Those are ones that typically, if you go to a gynecologist, those are ones that they're giving you for hormone replacement therapy if you're going into the menopause. And then there's bioidentical hormones. So bioidentical is a molecularly created to mimic your body's production of those hormones, exactly. So it's as if you were giving your body its own progesterone, its own testosterone, and it's So the thing is, there's far less side effects because there can be side effects to the synthetic hormones. Even birth control, like we're talking about synthetic hormones, we're not just talking about hormone replacement at menopause. Birth control is prescribed for so many different things. There are a lot of different side effects. The sluggish thyroid impacting the lining of the gut, brain fog, a lot of acne, hormonal changes.
Yeah.
Well, you can't even control. We don't even know what the hormones are doing anymore because we're just suppressing them with birth control.
Wow.
So
when someone's on birth control, which of course has been prescribed, I think it's since the 60s that became total normative.
Right.
No one was asking a lot of questions about it, except the Catholics. And so
true.
People have taken that a lot, and it's designed to stop hormone production, right? So the impacts of that must be significant.
Yeah, it is, it's not. We talk about symptom management versus root cause. If there's something going on with the hormones or the adrenals, the thyroid, or the gut, oh my goodness, we didn't even touch. That's a whole other thing. But if there's imbalances there, we're not going to know about them as much because we're just suppressing it with giving it synthetic progesterone, synthetic estrogen. So you're not even having you're not having a cycle. You're not having a cycle anymore.
And does that suppression over time reduce the body's ability to create that naturally then?
That's a great question. There's been studies on both directions on that. But because I have seen from my own patients getting off birth control and wanting to have healthy pregnancies, had dealt with miscarriages, and then there's the ability for the body to bounce back. So I've seen it both ways.
Good.
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely hope if you've been on birth control and you want to do an alternative, natural family planning, or there's other different things that don't have the synthetic hormones in it.
So when we're talking perimenopause and even into menopause, the common symptoms, are those very similar to the adrenal fatigue, or are there any distinctions that you would mention?
Well, one that you had mentioned, one is the hot flashes, the libido. Those things are pretty distinctive perimenopause because the hormones are just fluctuating. Yeah. They are going estrogen's high one day, progesterone's low, and it's just that the ovaries are almost spitting out a little bit.
Yeah.
However they please. And so to mitigate some of the symptoms, there are certain foods that can be eaten that can help balance, essentially phytoestrogens that kind of help with, because it could be lower estrogen, higher progesterone. Everybody's body's different. There could be a different hormone.
So it's a bit of chaos happening for the woman's body.
A little bit of chaos.
And that perfect rhythm is starting to get interrupted.
But say you're in perimenopause and you're still cycling. So to balance the hormones, you can do seed cycling. And so in the follicular phase, the flaxseed and pumpkin seed actually helps the most with supporting the estrogen and the minerals that are needed to give the body good support. And then in the second part, which is the last 2 weeks of the cycle, it's also you can do sesame seed and sunflower.
No, that's awesome.
And so that's something practical.
Just a supplement
like,
smoothie or just
put them in.
Yeah.
You can rotate them per day, put them in.
I see a lot of men right now
yogurts,
taking notes about buying flaxseed and pumpkin seed to incorporate into their wife's meal to keep that going.
Okay, and then can perimenopause impact fertility or miscarriages?
Yes, definitely.
Can you
Because
still get pregnant during perimenopause?
I mean,
if you're still having
cycle.
a cycle, you could still get pregnant.
Wow.
Yes,
Especially if you had some flaxseed.
I guess there are. There's still
careful if you regulate
11,000
those hormones so much.
11,000 eggs coming out.
Yeah,
so
you
I guess,
still-
I guess there's still an option here.
Some potential of something happening.
1 egg per
Yeah,
month.
absolutely. For sure.
So you still can. Fertility, yeah. So we talk about back to the adrenals. The cortisol will steal pregnenolone, which is the master hormone for progesterone. So progesterone is what allows the body to ovulate and to be able to release the egg to possibly get pregnant. So if we're talking about irregular cycles, it's oftentimes, there's probably something going on with the low progesterone and then what's causing the low progesterone.
And then let's talk about back to the synthetic. When do you know it's time? Like, say someone is like, I need more progesterone, whether they're trying to get pregnant or whether they're in perimenopause or this is the kind of the final big question is like, how would you counsel someone before we go to how to find a provider? How would you counsel someone to consider, whether it's through their OB or an integrative health doctor, how would you counsel them to see this kind of broad scope of what to begin with bioidentical versus synthetic? So for someone who is just needing that boost of hormones, is there kind of a phasing in of how to do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
So depending on the age, so 20s, 30s, way less likely to be recommending any type of bioidentical hormone therapy because the body, we're just trying to support what's already going on with the body, unless there's extreme cases and situations, which definitely happen. And then going into 40s, 50s, and into the 60s, then we're looking at, on a case-by-case scenario, how are the hormones doing? How is the woman presenting? Are there a lot of the symptoms going on of hot flashes, sleepless nights, decreased libido, different things like that? And then when we test the hormones, let's see where they're at. And if they're, that's where hormones are tricky, and hormone replacement therapy is a very fine line because you give one, it could impact the other. Sometimes a person just needs a little progesterone, and then the progesterone keeps estrogen in check. Sometimes you're going to need a little bit of both, and then sometimes you're going to need all three.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, for those of you who are listening and you're saying, this is a lot, it's the first time I'm hearing about some of this, I'm not even sure what to think about it. There's all kinds of learning you can do online about any of these topics. So I'd recommend you do that.
I actually do have on my website, I have some blog posts on signs and symptoms of perimenopause and some certain foods and actually like different types of exercises and things.
And what's the website?
It's pureintegrativehealth.com.
Okay, so check
we
that
will
out.
link that in the show notes.
And then if you're looking for somebody in your area, there's a website that's collected a lot of these integrative health folks, and that's ifm.org. And you can look that up by your locality to see if there's someone there. You could go interview them, ask them questions that you're curious about to see if there's someone you want to weigh in on this conversation. But the good news is a lot of this information is coming to light. I mean, we're seeing people wake up to the way medical has been presented to most of us, and we just assumed we were getting better by treating symptoms, isn't working. And in acute, certainly in some cases it's needed, but in a lot of cases for our bodies, we're trying to get back into the design, the rhythms of which God gave us for life to be lived to its fullest. And we're so grateful for you taking time to just help us better understand. I mean, as a guy, I learned a lot today about
I've
what
learned
Rebekah's
so much
going
from
through.
your podcast. I've listened, I just love the way in which you have different approaches and practicalities, and the rhythms are critical. Like, they're critical. Morning sunlight, the challenge that you did was amazing because it's like 10 minutes of morning sunlight. opens up vitamin D receptors, and then vitamin D is a precursor to melatonin. So then people are going to be sleeping a lot better the next night.
Yes.
They're going to go out and do that 10 minutes of
Girl,
morning
that's
sunlight.
why I have
walking.
Yeah, getting outside constantly for me has been such a shift over the last decade. I grew up in Florida, so I grew up outside. And something about it just reminds me of like, I can let down, just get outside for a quick walk, maybe a couple times a day, morning and evening, just depends, before the bus comes or with the bus and the kids ride bikes. But all those things are these de-stress practices that have just lift the mood, give you a little burst of energy, get some protein. There's so many things that, this is the beauty. We're learning how to rebuild a life, right? Like in every stage and season. And Building a Resilient Life, I wrote a couple years, or it came out last year, but this is like this building, like it requires some building blocks. It requires some proactive attention to things instead of just kind of flatlining and reacting, but being intentional with these practices. So we're asking you to not only rebuild, in your 20s and your 30s, but then again in your 40s and your 50s. Every decade, I think every birthday is you wake up with breath in your lungs and you're grateful. And then you go, God, what are the things you want me to know about this next season? And bring the people around, go before me and bring the people around. So Emily was one of those people that got brought around. But you will need this in your community. You will need this in your marriage. You will need this in your friend group. You'll need this in your city. So take the time for yourself. Like we all advocate for self-care. This is a lot bigger than a massage or a facial. This is literally rebuilding a life physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And God's going to do that. And thankfully, He's the author of life, which means He is a regenerative God. He's always doing a new thing every morning. His mercies are new. And so this is to encourage you, not overwhelm you. You can take it in bite-sized nuggets. But if any of this resonated with you, just go back to that section and kind of re-listen to that, and then talk to someone in your area and get on a journey for health.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, for being with us. You've helped us get more enlightened on these important topics. We're all learning, and that's the beauty of this. But it does take work.
Thank you so much for having me.
I think a lot of people are going to, you realize this is going to take some time in my schedule to learn more. And we can't just run at this pace where we just assume everything's going to be okay. Like health, what we're eating, the order in which we're eating, like we're having to think about this a lot more. And so anyway, I hope everybody feels encouraged. We're going to keep learning together. You can count on us to continue to have episodes where we talk more and more about these kinds of topics that are going to help you live into rhythm. And we hope you have a wonderful week.
So that was a lot.
That was, and it was good. I learned a lot.
You did. You
was
were
fun.
all in.
Well, I have. Yeah, it's
you
the
learn
stuff
you
I think a lot
ovulate
about
every day.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe that was captured on recording.
That was my favorite part.
But that's telling. I don't think a lot of people know that, and it's so helpful for husbands and wives to just recognize our bodies are working differently. This explains a lot of things, but the food intake, our sleep. I mean, there's just so much here. It's one of those episodes probably worth going back. Listen again, maybe bring your family around, a friend, take some notes, figure out what does this mean for you, and take advantage of the different resources we gave you there at the end where you can go and actually learn, look up who is doing integrative medicine in your area, and how can you start to have these conversations so it personally applies to your life.
And I would say wives, invite your husbands on a road trip or sometime in the car to listen along. I think it's going to help them understand what you might not be able to articulate to them when you're just feeling low energy, hot flashes, all those things. Invite them into the conversation because they want to know too. I think so often we don't know how to best love someone who's walking through something hard, and this will equip them as well.
So, and a reminder, join us and get to meet Emily in person and have your own questions that maybe came out of this at our Rhythms Emotional Health Retreat taking place November 21, 22 in Franklin. Go to RebekahLyons.com/retreat. Use code RFL100 to get a discount. Bring a friend. And we'll look forward to hanging out with you and having some great conversations in person here in Franklin, Tennessee. Have a great week.